There comes a moment in your life when something shifts, quietly, deeply, not with a loud declaration, not with drama, but with a clean, invisible decision. And that moment is this: the day you stop explaining yourself, the day you realize that your existence doesn't need to be justified. Your boundaries don't need to be softened. Your truth doesn't need to be packaged into something more palatable for other people to accept. You stop. Just stop. You don't answer every question. You don't give context for your choices. You don't bend over backward trying to make everyone understand you, approve of you, or feel comfortable with who you've become. Because the more you explain, the more you shrink. The more you explain, the more you dilute the fire in your gut, the clarity in your soul, the path that only you can walk. At some point, you understand. Explanation is often just a disguised apology, an unconscious need to be accepted, to be liked, to not ruffle feathers. But when you wake up, when you really wake up, you realize you don't need their comfort. You need your power, and your power lives in silence, in mystery, in unapologetic clarity. That's the level up. That's the moment you stop being who the world trained you to be, the version that explains itself, tones itself down, softens its edges, and you become who you really are. You don't explain peace. You don't explain distance. You don't explain why you said no, why you left, why you changed, why you didn't respond, why you're not available, why you're not who they remember. You just are, and they can feel it. That's the part people don't talk about, the energetic shift. When you stop explaining yourself, the people who relied on your self-doubt to manipulate you, they feel it. They feel the wall go up, the access removed, the doors close. You don't need to argue. You don't need to fight. You just exit the conversation, exit the explanation, exit the game. And that silence is louder than anything you could say. That silence forces people to deal with themselves, to feel the absence of your old pattern, the one that bent, the one that gave in, the one that over-explained just to keep the peace. But peace at what cost? Your energy, your self-respect, your time. That's the trade you stop making. You wake up and realize not everyone gets a seat at the table of your clarity. Not everyone gets to be invited into your why. Your why is sacred. Your decisions are sacred. Your evolution is not a group discussion. It is personal. It is private. And the more powerful you become, the more silent you get. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've said it all before, and now you're done performing for people who were never truly listening. You level up when you realize that your worth is not a debate. Your growth is not an open forum. Your story is not up for review by people who haven't lived it. You don't need to defend your healing. You don't need to explain why you pulled back. You don't need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You just keep moving, quietly, powerfully. And here's the truth. People will notice. People will sense the change. Not because you announced it, but because your energy no longer seeks to be translated. You stop being accessible in ways that drained you. You stop giving people a front row seat to your internal process. You stop narrating every transformation because you're not here to be digestible. You're here to be whole. And wholeness requires boundaries, requires sovereignty, requires the ability to disappoint others rather than betray yourself. That's the upgrade. That's the moment everything starts to shift. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop handing out pieces of yourself in exchange for crumbs of validation. You stop explaining what you've outgrown. You stop watering down your power so people can sip it without choking. No more. You let them choke. Let them guess. Let them project. Let them wonder what happened. Let them mislabel the distance. Let them build stories in their minds. That's not your burden to carry. Your job is not to control their perception. Your job is to honor your evolution. And the moment you realize that, the moment you embody that, is the moment you become unstoppable. Because now you're not seeking permission. You're walking in truth, and truth doesn't need applause. It just needs alignment. Silence doesn't need justification. Distance doesn't need a paragraph. Your boundaries don't need to be softened just because someone else is uncomfortable with your clarity. There is a kind of freedom that comes the day you realize you don't owe your presence to anyone. You don't owe your energy, your time, your emotional labor to people who drain you, question you, or refuse to respect your space unless you explain it in perfect terms. That's the trap. Feeling like you need to make your evolution digestible for people who never really cared about your truth to begin with. And you start to see it clearly. Every time you explain your silence, you chip away at its strength. Every time you explain your absence, you hand back the power you claimed when you walked away. Every time you justify your boundaries, you shrink the space you fought to build. But then comes the moment when you stop. Not because you're angry, not because you're bitter, but because you're done negotiating your peace. You're done watering down your worth. You're done offering pieces of yourself for people to poke holes in. You realize your silence isn't passive. It's potent. It speaks. It sets a tone. It draws a line. And the ones who truly respect you will never ask you to explain it, because they'll feel it, they'll get it. And the ones who don't, let them stay confused. Let them stay outside the door you locked for a reason. Your life is not a courtroom. You are not on trial. You don't need to convince anyone that your healing is valid, that your distance is necessary, that your boundary is sacred. When you stop over-explaining, you start listening to yourself, to your own voice, to the quiet truth inside you that was always there, but drowned out by the noise of trying to keep everyone else comfortable. And that voice says this: you are allowed to walk away without permission. You are allowed to change without sending out a memo. You are allowed to say, "This is enough," and not explain the years that led to that decision. Because real growth isn't about shouting your evolution. It's about living it firmly, quietly, fully, and people will notice. They'll notice that you don't explain anymore, that you don't over-text, over-justify, over-apologize, that you simply move. And that movement, so still, so intentional, it commands a different kind of attention. It sends a signal: I'm not available for the old games. I'm not here to be understood by everyone. I'm here to protect what I've built, to protect who I'm becoming. And that kind of energy is unshakable. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it doesn't shrink to fit into spaces that demand you leave your soul at the door. No, it stands tall, alone if it has to, and in that solitude it finds strength, not loneliness, clarity, because sometimes to truly level up, you have to let people misunderstand you. Let them think what they want. Let them carry their stories. You're not here to correct every narrative. You're not here to babysit anyone's perception of you. You're here to build a life so aligned, so full of integrity, that it speaks louder than any explanation ever could. That's the shift. That's when you start moving different, walking different, choosing different. You stop needing to prove you're a good person. You stop over-explaining why you're busy, why you didn't answer, why you're not who you used to be, because you realize it's not your job to explain a life they were never willing to understand in the first place. You level up when you make peace with being misunderstood, when you realize that keeping your peace matters more than defending your path. And in that silence, in that stillness, in that unshakable boundary, you reclaim every ounce of power that was once scattered through explanations, arguments, and emotional labor that never bore fruit. You come home to yourself, and you realize this is where the real power lives. Not in noise, not in convincing, but in alignment, in presence, in walking away without a sound and never looking back. Every time you explain yourself, you reveal something. And I'm not talking about truth, I'm talking about cracks, openings, places where you still seek validation, still need someone to say, "Yeah, I get it." And in that moment, you hand over a map A map to your insecurities, a map to your triggers, a map to the buttons they can press later when it benefits them. And this isn't about paranoia, it's about awareness. It's about knowing that not everyone deserves full access to your internal world. Because some people don't listen to understand. They listen to memorize, to store ammunition for a later day. That's what over-explaining does. It gives them the tools to manipulate your doubt, to question your confidence, to poke at the version of you that still needs to be liked, still wants to be understood. But what if you didn't? What if you allowed yourself to not be understood? What if you let people sit in confusion while you stayed in your clarity? Because here's the truth. When you stop explaining, you stop leaking. You stop bleeding energy. You stop giving out free passes to your emotional system. You become sealed, composed, unreadable in the best possible way. And unreadable doesn't mean fake. It means you've matured. You've learned what to share and what to guard. You've learned that not every question deserves an answer, that not every demand for explanation is a genuine concern. Some are just tests, power plays, disguised attempts to destabilize your center. And when you're centered deeply, you don't flinch. You don't defend. You don't panic when misunderstood, because you know who you are. And that knowledge is louder than any explanation ever could be. Think about it. When was the last time explaining yourself actually made you feel better? Truly. When was the last time someone's interrogation of your choices ended with you feeling seen, respected, validated? Rarely, because most people aren't looking to understand. They're looking to control. They want you to shrink just enough to make them feel comfortable. They want your confidence to bend so theirs can breathe. But the moment you realize this, the moment you see it play out in real time, you stop playing. You stop responding to every why. You stop decoding yourself for people who only value you when you're small. And it changes you. Your silence becomes strategy. Your privacy becomes power. Your presence becomes so composed, so rooted, that people can't quite read you anymore. And that unsettles them, because people are used to accessing you. They're used to you spilling everything, your thoughts, your fears, your timelines. But now you're closed, not cold, just sovereign, just done leaking your soul for the sake of being understood. Because at some point you learn, not being understood is not a failure, it's a filter. It's how you separate the ones who truly resonate with you from the ones who only tolerated you when you were explaining yourself to death. The ones who get it. They don't need the paragraph. They feel your shift. They respect your space. They trust your silence. But the ones who don't, let them go. Let them spiral. Let them drown in the absence of the old you, the version that needed to be liked so badly it gave away power piece by piece. That version is gone. And now you're quiet, whole, private. And in that privacy, there's peace. A kind of peace that can't be touched because it isn't built on approval. It's built on alignment. And that peace is what makes you untouchable. Because no one can use what you don't reveal. No one can manipulate what you don't explain. No one can weaponize what they don't understand. And that is freedom. The kind of freedom that feels like a deep exhale after years of defending your existence. The kind of freedom that makes you magnetic, not because you're trying, but because you're no longer leaking energy trying to be everything for everyone. You're just being. And being is enough. You don't explain your glow. You don't explain your decisions. You don't explain your detachment, your silence, your peace. You just walk. Quietly, powerfully, unbothered, and they'll feel it. They'll feel the shift. And the ones who were only there to access your insecurity, they'll fall off naturally because you've changed the locks. You've rewritten the script. You no longer give them the map. You are no longer readable. You are no longer programmable. You are sovereign, and that's sovereignty. That's the upgrade. That's the level they can't follow you to. There is a moment, subtle but undeniable, when your energy shifts. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a speech or a warning. It just moves, silently, like a tide pulling back from the shore, and people feel it. They don't always know what changed, but they feel the absence of your availability, the absence of your emotional explanations, the absence of your desire to be understood. That's when your energy becomes clean, sharp, pure, not aggressive, not reactive, just clean. Because when you stop explaining yourself, you stop leaving residue, you stop leaving emotional fingerprints on conversations where you used to beg to be heard, to be seen, to be approved. You stop exhausting yourself trying to fix other people's misunderstandings. You simply act, move, decide, leave, rest, evolve, without commentary. And that's when things change. That's when your energy becomes undeniable. Because clean energy is magnetic. It doesn't seek, it draws. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't plead, it commands. And people don't always know what to do with it, because they're used to the version of you that hesitates, that checks in, that waits for permission, that explains every move so no one feels uncomfortable. But you're not that anymore. You're not cleaning up behind your choices anymore. You're not issuing emotional disclaimers anymore. You're not trying to make your boundaries digestible to people who never respected them anyway. Your energy now speaks one language: certainty. Not arrogance, not coldness, certainty. A grounded, rooted, I know what I'm doing kind of certainty. And certainty makes people uncomfortable, especially the ones who benefited from your confusion. Because when your energy is clean, people can't hook into it. They can't guilt you, can't bait you, can't twist your words and drag you into debates you never signed up for. You give them nothing to feed on, no justifications, no explanations, just silence or action or absence. And that is terrifying to them. Because clean energy means they no longer have access to the old you, the one that overshared, overcared, overfunctioned, the one that stayed in conversations long after they turned toxic, the one that kept explaining their heart until it broke from the repetition. But now you've leveled up. And leveling up doesn't always look like more money, more status, more noise. Sometimes it looks like this: saying less, moving quieter, holding your boundary with no emotion, no excuse, no speech, just the boundary. That's what power looks like when it matures. It's not loud, it's not theatrical, it's clean, it's deliberate, and because of that, it's untouchable. You start to notice it in your life. People who used to test you don't. People who used to expect you to explain everything stop asking. People who relied on your insecurity to feel powerful fade out, because your silence confronts them more than your words ever could. Your composure becomes confrontation. Your restraint becomes rebellion. Your lack of reaction becomes a mirror, forcing them to face their own noise. And that mirror is uncomfortable, because when you clean up your energy, it reflects the chaos in others, and they'll either rise to meet you or retreat. Either way, you don't flinch, you don't chase, you don't go back to explaining. You keep your energy clean, because clean energy protects your peace. It protects your time. It protects your spirit from becoming a public space for other people's projections. And that is sacred. You become a different kind of presence, less accessible, more intentional. People may say you've changed. Good, that's the point, because who you were needed to explain, but who you are now doesn't. You walk in clarity, in calm, in truth. And the truth doesn't scream. It just is. And that is the most powerful version of you yet. Your evolution doesn't need a narrator. It doesn't need a press release. It doesn't need a long thread of justifications, a carefully curated caption, or an explanation wrapped in politeness so people don't feel left behind. No, your evolution needs space, not noise, not eyes, not approval, space. Quiet, clean, protected space, the kind of space where you can breathe again, where your thoughts aren't being picked apart, where your boundaries aren't being negotiated, where you're no longer performing clarity for people who only ever wanted access, not understanding. Because here's the truth, real growth is invisible. First, it happens in silence, in solitude, in the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And that space is uncomfortable. You'll feel tempted to explain, to update people, to make sure they know you're not being cold, or just going through something, or still the same person. But you're not. And that's okay. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them create stories. Their confusion is not your responsibility. Your only job is to evolve, not decorate your transformation for others to digest. Because the moment you narrate your evolution for them, you interrupt it for yourself. You shift your focus from inward to outward, from healing to performing, from alignment to approval. And in doing that, you lose momentum. That's the trap. That's what slows you down. The constant need to let people know, hey, I'm still good, still kind, still nice, still safe. But you're not here to be safe. You're here to be true. And the truth doesn't always feel soft. It feels solid, firm, grounded. It's not angry. It's clear. And clarity doesn't entertain confusion. It moves forward. Even when no one claps, even when the crowd leaves, even when the silence gets loud and the path gets narrow, you walk anyway, you grow anyway, you rise anyway, because you know the real ones don't need an explanation. They'll feel it. They'll see it in your absence, in your glow, in your peace, in the way you no longer respond to things that used to unravel you. They'll see it in how little you argue, in how quickly you walk away, in how deeply you protect your energy now. And the ones who don't, let them stay where they are. Your job is not to drag people into your evolution. Your job is to become so aligned that the only ones who remain are those who resonate with your silence, with your stillness, with your new frequency. That's the mark of someone who's truly leveled up. They say less, not because they have less to say, but because they've realized not everything deserves to be said. Not every feeling needs to be processed publicly. Not every boundary needs a backstory. Sometimes your silence is the answer. Sometimes your absence is the explanation. Sometimes your calm is the loudest declaration of who you are now. And that's the new you, the you who no longer seeks to be understood in places that never saw you. The you who no longer explains your softness, your strength, your solitude. The you who doesn't narrate your glow-up. You just live it, quietly, fully, completely. No noise, no drama, no need to prove anything. You level up in silence and let your life speak for itself. Because when it's real, when it's rooted, when it's sacred, you don't need to explain it. You just become it, and that is everything.